In 2011, a young physics graduate named Ross Ulbricht sat in front of his laptop with a radical idea. Ross wasn't your regular guy, a libertarian dreamer. He believed in absolute freedom. Freedom from government control, freedom from banks, freedom from rules he didn't agree with. His vision? An online marketplace where people could trade anything without government monitoring or interference. In short, a market free from the rules that guide the conventional world. And so, using the anonymity of the Tor network and the rising cryptocurrency Bitcoin, he built what would become the world's most infamous black market codename, the Silk Road. At first, it looked harmless. A few listings of weed, maybe some magic mushrooms. But Ross's little project soon grew into a monster. Within months, Silk Road became a billion-dollar empire. You could buy ecstasy, cocaine, fake IDs, even services darker than drugs. Hitmen openly advertised their bloody trade and closed deals on Ross's Silk Road. And all of it was hidden, anonymous, untraceable, or so they thought. But Ross wasn't just building a business. He was building an ideology. His users hailed him a hero, a visionary, a digital Robin Hood. But heroes can become villains, especially when money, power, and paranoia come into play. But who was Ross Ulbricht, really? And how did a clean-cut kid from Texas become the mastermind of the world's darkest marketplace? Ross Ulbricht was born in 1984 in Austin, Texas, USA. A bright student, outdoorsy, polite by all accounts, ordinary. But inside, Ross was restless. He devoured books on libertarian philosophy, idolized thinkers like Ron Paul, and dreamed of dismantling the systems he saw as corrupt. When Ross created the Silk Road, he didn't use his real name. He adopted a mysterious online persona, Dread Pirate Roberts, inspired by the Princess Bride. The name was no accident. It was meant to be a legend that could never die. If one leader fell, another would take the mask and step into the role. As Dread Pirate Roberts, Ross ruled over the Silk Road like a benevolent dictator. He preached about free markets, individual liberty, and nonviolence. But behind the rhetoric, he was managing a criminal empire that touched nearly every continent. And as the Silk Road exploded in size, Ross's clean-cut image began to crack. Because what happens when idealism meets billions of dollars and the constant threat of betrayal? Soon, Ross would learn that running an empire in the shadows comes with a heavy price. And the FBI was already watching. To most of the world, the Silk Road was invisible, but not to law enforcement. By 2012, federal agencies like the FBI, DEA, and Homeland Security had caught wind of this secret bazaar. At first, they didn't know who Dread Pirate Roberts was. They didn't even know where he was. But they knew the Silk Road was real, and it was growing fast. The marketplace had over 100,000 users, processing hundreds of millions in Bitcoin transactions. Agents went undercover. They posed as drug buyers, arms dealers, even money launderers. Every dirty racket was adopted to break into the group in order to investigate them better from within, discreetly. Every transaction brought them closer, but Ross had built layers of encryption to protect himself. To catch him, they needed to pierce the very anonymity of the dark web. Inside the agencies, tension grew. Was it even possible to catch a ghost? Or would Ross outsmart them all? And while the FBI hunted him in secret, Ross was dealing with a much deadlier problem within his own empire. As Silk Road grew, so did Ross's paranoia. Running a billion-dollar empire meant enemies were everywhere. Competitors, scammers, even his own moderators. Then came whispers, rival drug lords trying to take over, hitmen for hire offering their services. And Ross, the idealist who once claimed he'd never harm anyone, made a decision that would shock everyone. He began ordering hits. Yes, you heard that right. Ross Ulbricht, the libertarian dreamer, allegedly paid for assassinations to protect his empire. One of the targets was a former employee who had threatened to expose him. Another was a blackmailer who had bitten off more than he could chew. Now here's the chilling twist. These murders never actually happened. And this was only because the supposed hitmen were either scams or undercover agents who took on these contracts but refused to execute the hits. But the fact remains, Ross was willing to cross the line. And that changed everything. But how do you prove a man's identity when he hides behind a mask? As with all powerful crooks, there's always a tiny mistake that always gives them away, and the FBI was about to get its biggest break through one careless mistake. Ross was careful. He used encrypted chat, hidden servers, anonymizing networks. But even the smartest criminals have blind spots. And so, investigators discovered an old forum post from years earlier. Someone had advertised the Silk Road and left an email address. That email traced back to Ross Ulbricht. From there, the FBI began piecing together a digital puzzle. They tracked his online movements, followed his Bitcoin trails, and watched his real-world routines. Bit by bit, the mask of Dread Pirate Roberts began to unfold. But the feds knew one thing. They had only one chance to catch him red-handed. And that moment was coming soon. October 2nd, 2013, in a quiet San Francisco public library, Ross Ulbricht opened his laptop. He thought he was safe. He was wrong. After carefully scanning his environment, Ross quickly transformed into a secret persona and logged in as Dread Pirate Roberts. Around him, ordinary people read books, worked on assignments, seemingly absorbed in their business. But hidden in plain sight, federal agents watched his every move and keystroke ready to move in. But there was a bit of a challenge with the library operation. If Ross closed his laptop, all the evidence would vanish, encrypted forever. So agents devised a risky plan to catch Ross red-handed and with the evidence. As Ross sat typing, a young woman screamed. It was a staged distraction. Ross turned his head for just a second. That's when agents pounced, grabbing the laptop before he could shut it. On the screen, everything lay bare. The Silk Road's master control panel. Transactions, messages, the whole 9 yards. The ghost had been caught. Ross Ulbricht, the so-called Dread Pirate Roberts, was unmasked at last. But if you thought the story ended with Ross's arrest, you'd be wrong. The courtroom drama was only beginning. In 2015, Ross Ulbricht stood trial in New York. The charges? Money laundering, drug trafficking, computer hacking, and conspiracy to commit murder. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, hackers, libertarians, all watching as the young man who dreamed of freedom was unmasked as a criminal kingpin. Prosecutors showed the evidence from his laptop. Spreadsheets of drug sales, chat logs of hitmen conversations, detailed journals where Ross documented his rise as Dread Pirate Roberts. The defense argued Ross was a scapegoat, that others used the Dread Pirate Roberts name. But the evidence was overwhelming. After weeks of testimony, the verdict was clear, guilty on all counts. Ross Ulbricht was sentenced to 2 life terms, plus 40 years. The judge made it clear. This was meant to send a message. But was Ross truly the villain prosecutors painted him to be? Or was he a dreamer who flew too close to the sun? The Silk Road is gone, but its shadow still lingers. Copycat markets rose and fell. The dark web is still alive, and so is the debate Ross Ulbricht sparked. To some, he's a criminal who profited from addiction, chaos, and violence. To others, he's a martyr punished for challenging the system. Today, Ross's family continues to fight for his release. Petitions circulate. Debates rage. But one truth remains. Ross Ulbricht built something that changed the internet forever. He showed the world both the promise and the peril of true anonymity. Drugs, hitmen, forged passports. It wasn't just a marketplace. It was a revolution and a cautionary tale. Because in the end, freedom without limits comes at a cost. And Ross Ulbricht paid it in full.